Okay, please confirm you can hear me. Please confirm you can hear me, please.
Yeah, we can.
Okay, Your Excellencies, distinguished members of the Society of Petroleum Engineers Abuja section, welcome to our monthly technical meeting for the month of March 2026. Now, the Society of Petroleum Engineers is a body which is tasked with sharing technical knowledge that has to do with the exploration, production, dissemination of any technology that has to do with the energy industry, the oil and gas industry, and so on. This mandate, SP Abuja does this every month, where we share technical knowledge to our members and inform you of the latest technologies in the oil and gas industry. So on behalf of SP Abuja, we welcome you to this technical session. Today, we have one of Nigeria's finest energy professionals. He's a Swan-based manager with Platform Petroleum Limited, an avid volunteer of the Society of Petroleum Engineers Nigeria. And of course, he would be speaking to us on a theme, crude oil evacuation challenges, the fault lines in the Nigerian state. Of course, I'm speaking of engineer Dr. Chukwu Emeke, and of course, he's going to take us into deep knowledge on the fault lines in the Nigerian state. So please, I kindly appeal that for the next 1 hour, 30 minutes, you sit tight because we are about to learn so much. You also have the opportunity to ask him questions after his 40 minutes lecture. Of course, if you can see my screen, the next thing on here is the order of event for today. We'll have the safety brief, which I'm going to take it now. Please, for the course of this event, mute your microphone if you're not speaking. Raise your hands if you want to speak. And of course, I, as the moderator, I will help you to speak. Let's do it orderly. Of course, use the chat box for comments and your questions. Of course, I'll read the questions for Dr. Emeke when it's time for questions. Ensure you can hear the fire alarms with your headsets if you are alert and aware of the environment. And please stay safe. Going back, I would like to also announce that please, if you're driving, because I know it's close of work, it's better you park your car in a safe space, connect to your Bluetooth device, and engage with us. Don't listen while driving. So once again, you're welcome to our monthly technical session. I switch gears right now to introducing some of our amazing guests on the call. Please, when I introduce you, I kindly appeal that you unmute your mic and say hi to our amazing guests. And while they are doing that, for those of you on the chat, can you just do me a favor? Go to the chat box. Where are you joining us from? Just go to the chat box and tell us where you're joining us from, which parts of Nigeria, which part of the world are you joining us from? I'll be reading that after I am done with introducing our guest on the call. Of course, first of all, is the section chairman of SPE Abuja. When he became section chair, he had one clear mandate that SPE Abuja would be known to be a section with a culture of excellence. And we have been having this at a back-to-back level, back-to-back events, back-to-back awards. And of course, he is on the call. Please help me celebrate Professor Ikechukwu Okafor on the call. Good evening, sir. Confirm you can hear me, sir.
Good evening, Akpan. Good evening, everyone. I can hear you, and it's good to be here. Welcome, everyone who has joined. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Section Chair. Also on the call, we had the program's chair. She is on the call. The program's chair too on the call, Dr. Yetunde Aleidetan. A very warm evening to you, ma'am. Confirm you can hear me. Thank you for joining us, ma'am.
Thank you, Akpan. I can hear you. Good evening, everyone. Welcome on board, and thank you.
Okay. And of course, still on the call, the man that will be speaking to us for 40 minutes. Of course, he's a Swan-based manager, Platform Petroleum Limited. I heard he loves to play golf as well. Ladies and gentlemen, engineer Dr. Chukwu Emeke. A very warm evening to you, sir.
Thank you, Akpan. Good evening, all. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, sir, for accepting to speak to SP Abuja. So, ladies and gentlemen, I would also like to welcome all of our senior members on the call, our student members on the call, our professionals from all the other sections that decided to join. Welcome to our MTM. So, let me go online and see those that have dropped their names online. Okay, Obe Ayan Feoluwa says they're joining from Lagos. Welcome. Thank you for joining us from Lagos. We also welcome and celebrate Tahir Muyi from Warri, Nigeria. Yes, we just left Warri for the STSC. Thank you, Tahir, for joining us. Still on the call, we have Paul Anyu. He's joining from River Park Estate, Airport Road, Abuja. Thank you, Paul Anyu, for joining. Of course, you have Victoria and Thanesius joining from Abuja. Thank you, thank you. Drop your charts. Let's see. We want this chat box to be as interactive as possible. When our speaker drops not yet, please drop in the chat box so we can read and enjoy with you. Ademola is joining from Bauchi. Wow, thank you. Babatunde from Abuja. Thank you. Christian Chinedu is joining from Gudu, Abuja. You are neighbors with us. Our SP Abuja office is here in Gadua in Abuja. Welcome, welcome, Christian. Mayowa is joining from Abuja. Yes, please drop your comments. For Lake, wow, we have an international client. Folake from United Kingdom. Wow, thank you, Folake, for joining. I hope the UK is not as cold as it is here in Abuja. Christian Chinedu, awesome. Thank you for responding. Ladies and gentlemen, please drop the chats. Let's know where you're joining from. Of course, we can collaborate and interact while on the call. Let's continue the event. Ladies and gentlemen, we switch gears immediately to listening to our section chairman, Engineer Ikechukwu Okafor. However, he has informed us that the program's chair too will take the remarks on behalf of him. At this point, I'd like to welcome, of course, our program's chair too, Dr. Yetunde Aladitan, to help us with the opening remarks. Over to you, Madam, for the opening remarks, ma'am.
Thank you very much, Akpan. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, a very good evening to you all. I'm standing in for my chair today, Dr. Ikechukwu Okafor. So today we are gathered here to tackle a very critical issue that has been plaguing our energy sector, which is the crude oil evacuation challenges. Today, as we navigate the complexities of Nigeria's energy landscape, it is clear that the fault lines in their crude oil evacuation infrastructure are causing significant headwinds. Today, we are going to go into and explore the terrain, identify the fault line, and chart a path forward. And we have a very esteemed speaker that would share his thoughts, even on this area of discourse. And I believe that he will share very insightful nuggets for us today and share his insightful experiences and solutions. Thank you very much, and a warm welcome to you all. I'll ask that you stay, sit, relax, and listen to the insightful presentation. Thank you.
I'm having a presentation.
Thank you. Please, can we give her some virtual applause? Dr. Chuka, what did you say? Okay, please, let's give her some virtual applause. I'd like to see your chat box, your comments on the chat box, please. Celebrate our YPJ2 for that amazing, phenomenal welcome remarks. Ladies and gentlemen, crude oil evacuation challenges, the fault lines in the Nigerian states. Of course, Nigeria's oil and gas sector remains the backbone of the nation's economy, yet the efficient evacuation of crude oil continues to face persistent and complex challenges. This session seeks to bridge the gap between technical realities and national development priorities, offering actionable recommendations to secure Nigeria's crude oil evacuation systems and stabilize our energy future. Of course, the man that will be doing this lecture is a highly accomplished energy expert with an impressive career spanning over 20 years in the oil and gas industry, encompassing both offshore and onshore operations. Currently, he holds a pivotal role at Platform Petroleum Limited, a renowned player in the field of marginal oil production and one of the pioneers in achieving first oil in 2007. Chukwuemeka's career's journey includes significant contributions to Nigeria's first deep offshore project, Amazing, the Abo FPSO. His deep understanding of the entire energy value chain from crude oil production processes to evacuation models and oil well planning sets him apart. He possesses exceptional leadership and management skills, allowing him to strategically deploy human resources to achieve corporate objectives effectively. One of his notable accomplishments has been his leadership of the crude oil evacuation team for an impressive 13 years, overseeing the live evacuation of over 60 million barrels of unspent crude to both Brass and Forcados terminals. Furthermore, Chukwuemeka's team successfully designed and delivered an infill well for water disposal and several ongoing well projects expected to substantially increase asset holdings and production capacity. Educationally, Chukwuemeka earns his higher national diploma in petroleum and gas processing technology from the Petroleum Technical Institute PTI in 2007 and subsequently obtained a follow-up degree in petroleum engineering from the University of Port Harcourt. He actively contributes to the oil and gas industry as a board member with the Society of Petroleum Engineers Lagos section, served as a student chair liaison, chairperson, section secretary, and of course is currently the special projects chair. As a multi-award recipient, he won the 2024 SPE African Regional Production and Operations Award and the 2025 WAY Awards. I think there's some virtual applause in the chat box. His unwavering commitment to knowledge acquisition is an evidence in his extensive postgraduate qualifications, which includes an MSc in Petroleum Engineering from the University of Benin, an MBA from the same institution, a mini MBA from the Tikedia Institute of Boston, USA. He holds a PhD degree in petroleum economics, management, and policy from the Emerald Energy Institute, University of Port Harcourt, and has published over 27 papers in reputable local and international journals. He is a prolific speaker with over 40 speaking engagements across diverse subject areas in a calendar year. Wow, this is very impressive. Chukwuemeka is happily married to Dr. Mrs. Victoria Chukwu, and they are blessed with 2 children. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time to hear from the Swamp Manager Platform Petroleum Limited. Please help me welcome Dr. Chukwuemeka, MSc, MBA, PhD. Over to you, Pastor Sir. Thank you, sir, for accepting to speak to SP Abuja.
Well, thank you, Akpan. Thanks a lot for the introduction. I'm privileged to share my thoughts on this very subject matter. Thanks a lot to SP Abuja session for having me, Dr. Kafa and his team, and of course my the program's chair, who also doubles as the chair for Institute of Petroleum Engineers in Nigeria, Dr. Yetude. Thanks a lot for having me, and to everyone on the call. I'm happy to share my thought on this very important subject matter. I look forward to a very interactive session with you. I trust that we'll have enough questions to help spice up the evening. If you just give me a few seconds to quickly share my slides. Please confirm you can see my slides.
Yes, we see your slides, sir.
So this evening, we want to look at crude oil evacuation challenges. Of course, this also exposes the fault lines in the Nigerian state. This is not just about crude oil evacuation challenges, but how this impacts on the economy generally, how this also impacts on the health sector, how this impacts on the educational sector. And I trust that at the end of this discourse, we'll have some very meaningful gleanings in terms of knowledge sharing and transfer to begin to question the current order and come up with actionable solutions to solving some of the problems that we already know. Before now, if you want to develop a typical asset in Nigeria, you want to bring in the very best of your geologists to confirm sizable volumes, and of course the reservoir engineer calculating all the numbers, and then the drilling engineer comes up with his tool to get to where the oil is and bring it to surface, and then you you align this with the production engineers and, of course, the operators to help you properly produce the oil and take it to the terminals where it is either sold or refined for domestic consumption. But now I think the thinking is gradually shifting. The way we view the entire field development plan is changing, because the point is, if you cannot evacuate, please don't even bother to develop. It is completely a waste of time to put in all the man hours, connect all the intelligence, only to finish your design, and you drill and you confirm substantial volumes, and then you come to the point, the reality that the culture, the environment does not allow you to effectively take your product from the production zone to where to be sold. And that has been the current reality of our Nigerian state. Prior to this time, I remember in one of our pipeline assets that was locked in for close to 2 years because we couldn't just evacuate, not even a barrel of oil through that pipeline asset. And of course, you also imagine that if you cannot do business, or the best bet is to close shop. And this is the current reality of a lot of operators, both in the upstream and downstream sector. So what are the issues? Are these issues just purely technical, or are they deeply connected to our Nigerianness, to what we see, whether in the Northeast or in the Southwest, or the last bomb or the last attack that took place in Jos, leading to the death of several persons? Or is it even heavily connected to the crisis between Israel and Iran, leading to the shutting down of 20% of the global oil transportation around that region? So as we begin to look at some of these typical issues, whether it is local or as international alignment, how does this affect you as an individual? And what can we do to provide workable, actionable solutions as we move into the next transition phase? So this evening, I will just do, of course, a short introduction, which I've almost covered, and then we'll look at crude oil evacuation systems. We'll currently just review the fault lines in Nigerian states. We'll look at possible solutions. We'll conclude and hope that we'll get some very good questions to spice up the conversation. So this is just me in a very brief summary. I'm a Christian. I've been in the industry for over 20 years. You can please connect with me on LinkedIn. Currently, I have over 26 connections, about 28 published work that can be viewed on ResearchGate. That journey has seen me join a very notable profession, from SP to NSC to Pipeline Association of Nigeria, and several top industry professionals. The issue with the Nigerian state is not the lack of resources, but what are we doing with the resources? Just to give an overview, Nigeria is just a subset of Africa. Africa, probably with the GDP slightly around $3.1 trillion. It's a very poor continent, even though we are the second largest continent in the world, just behind Asia. In terms of a square kilometer, Asia is about 45 million square kilometers, second by Africa, which is around 33 million square kilometers. So Africa being the second largest does not necessarily mean that we are the second richest. The richest continent in the world is, of course, the America, which is closely connected to Europe, which is also a very wealthy continent. But then if you look at where Africa sits right now, with probably a little around $3 trillion, just one company in US is probably richer than the entire African continent. For example, Apple if you look at the market cap of Apple, it sits around $3.3 trillion. Or if you even look at the market cap of Alphabet, the parent company of Google, you would notice that that company is also probably richer than Africa. Nigeria being a subset is mineral rich, but in terms of economy, it's also a very poor country, less than $400 billion GDP. If you compare where Nigeria sits in terms of economic power to all the oil majors that have exploited oil, and of course, have been enriched by the resources they've taken from Nigeria. Probably Shell, in terms of market cap, is close to Nigerian GDP. Shell market cap is sitting roughly around $225 billion. So you see that Nigeria being oil rich does not necessarily translate to being economically viable. That is because over the years, since oil was seen in Oloibiri in 1956 to date, we've not been able to fully develop that oil resources into a vibrant economy. And that is because we don't have the quality of leadership. We don't have the quality of technology. And of course, the size of capital to help transform these very important resources that we have. So within the Nigerian space, Nigeria has about 37 billion barrels of crude in reserve. Of course, if we produce this reserve at the rate at which we are producing it, without adding additional reserve, this resource may not likely cross 40 years from now. It is also very important to lay it out that even though we are limited in terms of oil reserves, we are also very gas rich with over 200 trillion scof of gas proven reserves, and of course, over 600 trillion scof that is yet to be proven. So Nigeria is a gas province with sprinkles of oil. We've not managed to actually harness the massive gas resources we have in the country. The focus over the years has always been oil, because oil, of course, is a cheap resources. And currently, oil contributes to about 90% of our forest earnings. So whatever happens outside Nigeria in terms of international oil pricing also affects us. So where does Nigeria sit? We have about 323 developed fields, 265 processing stations, 8 onshore export terminals, over 5,000 kilometer pipelines, 1.73 million barrel per day production, with an OPEC quota of 1.5 million production. Even though we have this production capacity, I remember some few years ago where we were doing over 2 million barrels per day, and of course we were bringing in all the earnings. And of course, as at that time, the forest inflow into the country some 15, 20 years ago was about $25 billion. That over time has thinned down to roughly less than $5 billion. And that is because most of the IOCs were divesting their interest away from Nigeria. So you see that because we have also not managed to diversify our economy to other resource centers, we are deeply relying on what oil can give us in terms of energy sources. We'll see some of this problem as we just progress. Some of the crude oil evacuation systems we have globally, of course, from pipeline to trucking to rail systems. And I'm wondering why our pipeline systems are not working. It's not because we don't have enough of these pipelines crisscrossing the entire country, but because we've developed a very deep-rooted culture of lack of maintenance. We practically fail to maintain anything in this country, whether it is pipelines or railways, or it is even the roads. Just some few days ago, I spent close to 2 hours just to travel from Benin to Sablé. Ordinarily, it ought to just be a 30 minutes drive, and yet I spent a whooping 2 hours man-hour just to get to my destination. And this just outlines some of the issues that we'll discuss shortly. Beyond just the pipelines and the trails that are available to evacuate our crude oil, we also have the shipping options. Of course, Nigeria is blessed with a lot of water bodies, a lot of strategic ports that has also been left abandoned. Whether we're talking about the Warri port, or we're talking about the Onne port, or in Port Harcourt, we're talking about the Cocoa port in Delta State. I think the only thriving port currently in the country is probably the one in Lagos. And of course, we also have the ports that ought to be working in Calabar and some other part of the country that we have not fully harnessed. So these are possible evacuation routes that we have not actually looked at. The barging option became very prominent just some few years ago when our pipeline systems came to almost a standstill. But then we saw that the barging option is also not very economically feasible. You need to be losing at least 80% of your production to even make the barging option a little bit more economically viable. So just a short summary of our pipeline assets and system in the country. We have about 5 terminals, 21 petroleum depots, 5 kilometers of crude oil pipelines crisscrossing the entire country, 4,400 kilometers of product pipelines network. I want to focus a little bit on the product pipeline shortly in the next slides because of the importance of this in our national well-being. We also know that every one of us are suffering the crisis occasioned by the Strait of Hormuz. And that strait just probably controls 80% of global oil resources. So why is that strait so strategic to the extent that it's affecting us along the Atlantic coast? One would think that those probably around the Pacific coast will have more severe impact compared to those of us in the Atlantic coast, because of course there will also be crude oil resources movement along the Atlantic coast, moving on from Africa down to Europe and of course to America. Of course, we're also getting products from Brazil and some Venezuela and some other part of the continent. But you see that the guys in the Gulf have developed their asset to the point where you can account for every molecule of oil that is produced, compared to those of us in Africa, where we are not even sure of what we are producing. We'll see some of this as we progress in the conversation. So if you look at the way the Nigerian system is designed, actually before we started having some of these issues, either it is from how we select our leaders to how we populate results, how INEC announces results, down to how we educate our students and how we prepare the students to take up positions in the labor market. You will see that the Nigerian system was structured in a way to progress until we begin to have an inroad of people who took over our leadership structures, people who started making policies that are not working, people took over the organ of production, and then they came up with diluted policies that are not moving us forward. And these are some of the issues we'll discuss shortly. So if you look at the product pipeline across the entire country, whether you're talking about from System 1 to System 4, System 1 deals with the West, connecting the Alaska jet in Lagos to Ibadan, Ore, and Ilori depots. You look at System 2, which is majorly in the East, connecting Port Harcourt refinery to Aba, Enugu, and of course, all the way down to Makurdi depot. And then you have also System 2A, linking Warri refinery to Benin, Ore, and Lagos. And then System 2B, which is of course the busiest, connects, of course, Ilori depots all the way to Ibadan. And then System 3B, which connects the Kano refinery to Kano, Jos, and Suleja depot. And of course, the last System 4 connects Kaduna to the northeastern part of the country. With this structure system design, you discover that pipeline was meant to reduce the cost of transportation of finished product from one region of the country to another region of the country. And over time, if these systems were working, we will not be suffering, going through what we are going through right now. Every incremental impact in the cost of crude oil and that trickles down to the product affects the economy probably by over 40%. So if the cost of transportation goes up, it's going to bite on the cost of Maggi in the market, the cost of salt in the market, the cost of garri in the market. Everything is impacted by the cost of transportation. So Nigeria is actually plagued not just with the high cost of energy, but also it's deeply connected to our transportation system. So at one end, we are dealing with the high cost of energy. At the other end, we are dealing with bad roads and, of course, deep-rooted bad governance. As we begin to look at this structural decay, I just want to prep in our minds that behind every structural decay, there's an opportunity to innovate. There's an opportunity to come up with solutions that will change the narrative. And as we begin to inspire young people and, of course, professionals in the industry to come up with workable solutions, that is the only way we can save our country and make our country the oil-rich nation it ought to be in Africa. So what are the feasible evacuation challenges we have? Top on the agenda is pipeline vandalism. Pipeline vandalism has created loss of crude oil in excess of 100,000 barrels per day, and that is massive. Imagine you are losing close to $2 billion every day in a country that is poor, that is economically poor. And I've said this severally. If we come to the realization that we are poor as a nation, the way we address ourselves, the way we put ourselves forward, should be different. That realization should help us to rework our model, to look at the way we organize, and then come up with solutions to get ourselves out of this poverty trap. But if we pretend that we're rich and we portray to our neighbors and to other nations whom we are borrowing from that we are rich, and at the same time, it is very obvious that we are poor, we'll continue to swim in that poverty net. And that is what we see. You have most of our leadership who run our political systems, put forward an image of wealth, while we have deep-rooted poverty within our system. Beyond just the vandalism is the underlying problem of poverty. If people have jobs, if people are deeply connected with jobs, whether it is a paying job or a business that puts money in their pocket, I don't think people want to risk their lives to go busting pipelines and busting gas pipelines just to get some trickles of wealth. And beyond just people going all out to bust this pipeline, it also illustrates the deep-rooted decay in the Nigerian state, where even state actors, there are reported cases in newspaper outlets and, of course, several research documents where state actors have been found wanting in carrying out some of this pipeline vandalism, to the extent that there are some points where it was on the media that state actors were even organizing themselves to have these local refineries in Port Harcourt, to the extent that the entire Port Harcourt region, was covered with black soot because everybody were involved in illegal petroleum refinery. And that alone tells a deep-rooted problem in our country. Beyond just the pipeline vandalism is aging infrastructure. If you look at the number of pipeline systems that we are constructing or building compared to what you have, it's little or nothing. So we just have some few pipelines that have been added to the quota compared to all the pipelines that have been built over 40 years ago. Some of these pipelines are not usable. You can't even put anything in them. I remember we had an issue for some of us who were landlocked around that Kwale zone. We had to now push up crude oil from Okpai all the way to Obibi down to Brass Terminal. And once there's any disruption in that pipeline, everybody will be shut down. Beyond just that pipeline is so critical to that region until we add an alternative pipeline running all the way to Forcados. So if Ajib and the companies, the major companies now currently Oando, if nothing is being done to build a brand new pipeline to replace the old pipeline that has served that corridor for over 30 years, we will still be relying on these pipelines that probably evacuate less than 20% of their installed capacity. So you discover that until we begin to replace this aging pipeline, we'll continue to struggle. And beyond just aging pipeline and of course pipeline vandalism is the security issues around these pipeline assets. It is quite instructive to note here that Tantita has probably saved the day. So imagine your critical infrastructure is being managed by private-run organization. First, I need to state here that it is because of the peculiar state of the Nigerian nation that has brought in these private actors to help safeguard this asset, which of course has increased our production from where it was less than 1.2 million barrels to close to 1.7 million barrels per day now. But beyond just having these private organizations helping to safeguard this asset, it also shows the failure on state actors whose original mandate is to protect life and properties. We need to understand that pipeline systems are very critical to our economy. And that is the reason why I'm very, very emphatic on the need to begin to reorganize internally, and to the point where we can trust our state instruments to protect these very critical assets that is contributing 90% to our forest inflow. Beyond just security gaps, we also have a deeply rooted environmental impact, where you have several pipeline vandalism and pipeline failures leading to oil spill across the Niger Delta. And that is also increasing the risk factor for operators around that region. And just lastly on that phase is the regulatory overlaps. So thank God for PIA, even though we went through that, we went through about two decades to get the PIA to a working document. But beyond just that, we also have the overlapping nature of regulators, whether the NNPC Limited at one end that ought to be a full-blown company, or the NUPRC that is supposed to be the regulator, or even NOSRA at that end that wants to superintend over oil spills and of course pipeline assets. So many times when we have issues of pipeline vandalism or oil pipeline incidents, you truly don't know who to reach out to as a single line regulator to oversee how we fix the situation and come up with regulatory oversight during oil spill. So that is something probably we need to look at in the new law. So it is also very instructive. I remember when I was working offshore, I used to hear of Abuja line. I didn't really understand what Abuja line is until probably 15 years later. And that speaks to metering fraud. If you look at Saudi Arabia, for example, every molecule of oil that is produced in that country is accounted for. Every molecule of oil. There's no oil that is produced from the wellhead to the terminal that you cannot account for. But for the Nigerian situation, you discover that it's very difficult to actually state categorically how much oil we are producing and how this oil leaves the wellhead to each of the terminals, whether it is the Akwa Ibom terminal or the Forcados terminal or even the Brass terminal. And that is because we don't have visible digital metering system that is open to all. I remember we have one of the probably the best gathering facility in Kwale where we use the Omni computer for our latch unit that has limited human interference in our metering system, such that where the crude oil is gathered from all the cluster members within the Kwale clusters are made up of about six oil companies that produce into that gathering facility. And then you have this latch unit that is interconnected, such that the Omni computer can actually account for every production from each of these companies. By 8 o'clock, the Omni computer prints out the production volume of each of the companies. It is automatic, and so you don't necessarily need human interference. And that is to show you that we have the technology. Smaller companies are applying that technology. And we can show to the nation and of course to industry stakeholders that this can be done the way it is done in Saudi Arabia. But what we want to see going forward is scaling up this technology to apply to every company in the nation, so that NUPRC, whether it is in Abuja or in Port Harcourt or in Warri or in Lagos, you can see vividly, digitally, what each company is producing. And you can also see digitally how this production is moving from the wellhead to the terminals. Until we do that, all the emphasis on pipeline vandalism, all the emphasis on crude oil theft, all the emphasis on managing our evacuation systems is just a joke. Because our ability to meter and to meter effectively, and of course, digitally display what you're metering, we show some of the fault lines in our pipeline system. We show some of the fault lines in where this oil is being sabotaged, where this oil is being stolen, where the theft zones are. And the moment you can hotspot where these theft zones are, you can now begin to develop military actions, develop security architecture to cure it. So again, like I said, metering is probably one of our biggest problems in the industry. And metering is not just cheaply allocating what any company produces by estimate, just the way BDC gives estimate numbers to customers because they want to recover cost. Metering has to be trustworthy. Metering has to be collaborative. Metering has to use the best innovative technology to ensure that the industry understands how critical it is to measure every molecule of oil that is being produced in country. So some of the case line analysis of these impacts, one of such is the repeated shutdown of the Trans-Niger pipeline, over time operated by Shell, and of course the Fucados terminal disruption. Of course, once this happens, most of the operators, especially the small ones, will be forced to shut down, of course, lock in production. And that also impacts on their bottom line. And of course, we also have the Nembe Creek truck pipeline that was abandoned at some point. I hear that efforts are ongoing, if it is not yet back online, to reactivate that pipeline. And that has led to over 2 billion annual loss of crude oil. And of course, in terms of potential crude oil production, over 400,000 barrels per day shorting. And this has great economic impact in our nation. Just imagine 400,000 barrels production just being lost because we cannot effectively evacuate what we are producing. And yet, the power minister says we need about $100 billion investment to reactivate the power industry, to get power to Nigerians that are suffering from acute darkness. So what you are losing from oil production, you are also losing in terms of our ability to generate power and get that power to the customers that need it. This is just a case study of one of the oil companies that are producing somewhere around the Kwale zone. And this just showcases the amount and the frequency of oil pipeline sabotage and vandalism in just one pipeline asset. So this research, I carried out this research many years ago, where I looked at all the pipeline incidents from 2008 to 2019. And this showcases how you can actually map out the potential hotspot. And this is just one pipeline asset. Imagine you have over 5,000 kilometer pipelines, and this happens in each of those pipeline assets. And this is just typical of what goes on around the country, where our pipelines are not safe. The way the recent outcry of the harassment of the gate child somewhere around Ozoro due to cultural differences. Thank God that the police were able to arrest that situation. And we're looking forward to a time where the state security system can actually bring an end to this incessant pipeline attacks. This attack is not just on our pipeline system, but also on the economy. So let's come back to the nitty-gritty of our meeting tonight. So we've looked at the crude oil evacuation challenges, some of the problems we have with evacuating crude oil from point A to point B. Just as I've emphasized, in our inability to monitor, to account for every molecule of oil that we produce in this country, and of course, and digitally display that figure such that we can say this is the amount of oil we are producing from the wellhead to the terminals. We know exactly how much is going to domestic consumption and how much is going to the international market. This showcases weak institutions. You can see this where we have mistrust in the institution that governs our political space. INEC that has been saddled by law to organize elections and of course display elections. And it has become a joke that sometimes when you don't bring forth credible election result, people cannot trust you to organize elections, because of the weak institution, not because we don't have the capacity to organize election, but the institutions are so weak. And these institutions is not just about poor enforcement or corruptions in regulatory infrastructure, but also on our ability to have proper legal layout for people to test some of these infractions in court. Recently, two of our very brilliant students were picked up in Warri. We had to go bail them. And the question I asked the police officer, as at the point where they were heading to the conference that night that they were picked up, a simple question and screening would have shown that these are not just miscreants. These are students who came for a conference. But that was not done. I had that conversation with the police officer. Why didn't you just ask a simple question? What are you doing? Do you have an ID? Where are you going to? And this is not just about the police officer, but it showcases the weak institutions where individuals, companies, business owners cannot test some of these infractions in a law court. Recently, one of the politicians was making a joke of how people procure judgments like procuring akara. So until we begin to strengthen our institutions, whether they're the regulatory institutions or the institutions that are empowered by law to enforce this law, we will continue to go around in a cycle. And that is what we have seen also in the proper oversight of our pipeline systems. Just to piggyback to the product pipelines that I showcased earlier on, are you not surprised that we have this massive pipeline infrastructure across the country from system 1 to system 4, and yet we cannot transport finished products, say from Dangote refinery all the way to Makurdi, or all the way to Port Harcourt, or all the way to Ilorin, or all the way to Kano, because the pipeline systems are not working. They are aged and they are in a deplorable state, having undergone serious vandalism and sabotage, such that any product you put in those pipelines will not get to the terminal. And even when you try to rehabilitate some of these pipelines, we don't have enough security architecture to govern, to police these pipelines, to deter people from sabotaging these pipelines. And so because these pipelines are not working, we have to rely on trucking. Don't also forget, research shows that for crude oil evacuation, you probably spend between $3 to $5 per barrel just to evacuate through the pipeline, which is, of course, the cheapest option. But if you're evacuating through trucks and any other means, you'll be spending as between $20 to $30 per barrel, which, of course, increases the cost of production. So imagine if our pipeline systems are working. Dangote will not need to put in massive number of trucks. Of course, some of them are already becoming road hazard because of reckless driving. And not just only reckless driving, but bad road. I did complain of the bad state of road. Just to travel from Lagos all the way to Port Harcourt, probably you will be spending an entire day. So you see that the roads infrastructures are bad. And then on top of that, you are putting trucks on that road that is already decaying. And that causes to question the need to quickly begin to develop a brand new pipeline infrastructure to drive down the cost of production. Another thing that also we need to look at that is also very prominent is the inequitable resource control. Even though that has been temporarily taken care of by the PIA, we are still very, very optimistic that the implementation will be better than the way it was formulated, the law was formulated. Because it's not just enough. Nigeria is not, the problem of Nigeria is not just having laws, but having a law that is implementable, a law that is feasible, a law that will trickle down governance to the locals. And that is some of the challenges we have with the PIA. As beautiful as the law, we are also looking forward to the implementation of that part of the law, where the host communities can be direct beneficiaries of some of these resources, that has eluded them over the years. And it's something that we also need to continue this conversation over time, just to ensure that if there are gaps, we can quickly look at these gaps and bring forward these gaps to the National Assembly for amendment. Another fault line that is very, very obvious before us is the militancy and insecurity. Like I said earlier on in the earlier slides, we cannot, and I say it again, we cannot have private organization superintending over our critical pipeline systems. Even though I applaud the current government of getting these private actors to help salvage the situation, but that cannot be a long-term plan. Nigeria must develop a long-term strategy to safeguard our pipeline asset, because it is costly, it is critical, and it is the only way we can drive down the cost of production, especially getting finished product to the end users. And of course, some of these issues that we've alluded to is also highlighted in the federalism structure that we practice. Even though we have subnationals that are supposed to be empowered by law to bring governance to the local, but the way the federal system is structured is such that there's an over-centralization of governance at the center. And we are looking forward to the APC government, and of course, with the decentralization of the police structure, and of course, other governance structure, such that the subnationals can be more empowered to bring the dividend of government to the locals. Until we begin to look at governance from that direction, we'll continue to go in cycle. And more importantly for us is the lack of transparency. Nigeria as a state must begin to come up with workable solutions that are transparent. Like I said, if you cannot measure what you produce transparently, then the end result will be shadowed in corruption. And that is why probably there's this general sentiment that NNPC, I don't know about the current NNPC, but the former NNPC is deeply rooted in corruption. But thank God for the current restructuring that's going on. We trust that over time, some of this structural adjustment will bring the needed transparency in our governance. So some of the solutions I think we can start looking at, and for the first time, we need to start rethinking the way we run governance. We need to start rethinking our models. We need to start rethinking how we build infrastructure. We need to start rethinking how we connect the product lines across the entire state. Again, thank God for the current restructuring that is going on with the gas pipeline, with the OB3 pipeline, of course, the AKK pipeline that's coming up on board. That is going to bring some kind of infused energy into the system, with gas moving from the south to the west, and from the west all the way connecting to the east and the north. It will also increase the gas demand envelope, especially in the north and the eastern region that have been isolated over the years. So we need to begin to rebuild pipeline systems that are resilient. Pipeline systems, come up with technology to safeguard these pipeline systems. We need to begin to employ surveillance technology. And I want to applaud Tantita, even though I've always said we cannot afford to have private individuals superintending over our national critical asset. But Tantita is doing well because they are deploying drones. This is what I expect state actors to do, using AI monitoring systems and digital systems to monitor what is going on in Nigerian oil fields, such that you can actually see movements across the entire region. Do we have the technology to do that? Yes. Do we have the political will to deploy this technology? Probably is something that we'll look forward to in the nearest few years ahead. Again, we need to decentralize evacuation infrastructure. So we need to begin to look at modular refineries. We need to begin to site refineries around where the oil fields are. So thank God for Dangote Refinery, who took the initiatives. And I've said this before. Dangote saw the gap in cement production. It came into that sector and cured it. He saw the gap in the oil refinery business. He came into that sector and cured it. Again, I have said before in some of my public speaking, Dangote is also going to see the gap in the power sector. He is also going to come into that sector and cure it. If the nation does not do anything about the steel sector, Dangote is also going to see a gap in that sector. It's going to come into that sector and then cure it. And then tomorrow, everybody will be crying that Dangote is monopolizing the economy. Because we are not doing what we are supposed to do as a nation, taking critical sectors and curing the problem step by step along the way, so that over time we can have a robust economy that sits well with the local populace. Let me remind the audience again. Nigeria's population is growing at the rate of probably over 3% per annum. What that means that in another 30, 50 years, Nigeria probably will be the most populous nation, one of the most populous nations, probably behind India. So if we don't begin to come up with initiative to ensure that our resources is being produced to surface, and we are turning this production into impactful economic product, we will continue to wallow in poverty. And again, we need to continue with the legislative reforms. We shouldn't just stop with the industry reforms, but also we need to look at, how do we legitimate over conflicts. We need to begin to look at the courts, how the court comes up with judgments. Can we trust the court as unbiased empire between two individuals? Because until we establish that, we will not respect the rule of law as it affects business. And more importantly for me, we need to take this Host Community Development Trust Fund as serious as possible. The people who are the host of this critical facility must begin to see themselves as part and parcel of Nigeria. They must begin to see themselves as part and parcel of the economic well-being of the country. And I can demonstrate this. I remember many years ago, in one of the facilities I visited somewhere, I don't want to mention the name of the facility. If you walk into that facility, there's 24 hours light with all the facilities you can ever think about. If you walk in there, it's like you're in another city. But just walking out of that facility into the neighboring host community, there's perpetual darkness, no water to drink, not even good schools for the children to attend. And that gives an horrific view of the situation in Niger Delta, where the oil industries are seen as oppressors, not knowing that it is the Nigerian state that has created this discrimination. Because the oil business, the oil operators are paying tax to the Nigerian state, and the Nigerian state is saddled with the responsibility of providing the basic amenities to the populace. So we must begin to take this host community development trust fund as serious as possible. That is the only way we can cure some of these incidences, this vandalism, this sabotage in the Niger Delta. Again, just as a way of recommendation, we must establish strategic evacuation corridors, especially for those in landlocked regions. If you are not very close to the shores, it's difficult to build pipelines that is frequently being attacked or sabotaged. So one way to cure that is to have a shared risk system where companies from different companies can come together, build a common pipeline asset, a gathering facility, and then the risk can be shared across those companies. We must also improve access to technical and financial support. The oil and gas business is a very expensive one. We must begin to look at ways of assessing low funding structures such that we don't necessarily increase the cost of production. It is probably only in Nigeria and of course some part of Africa where the cost of production is over $25 per barrel. We need to look at ways of assessing cheap financing and as such also develop innovative infrastructure to drive down the cost of production. Of course, we also need to continue to build capacity and ensure operational excellence. And that trickles down to how we train our students in the universities. And I've said this before, no nation develops ahead of its educational system. In a nation where professors are poorly paid, lecturers are poorly paid, the quality of education will also be poor. And then you give birth to students who come into the industry poorly prepared. We must begin to revisit the budgetary provision to education, where your budget provision is less than 9% of your budget. That is a foul crime compared to a nation I want to develop beyond $500 billion economy. So we must begin to focus more on capacity building. And I've said this before, just as we focus training on reservoir engineers, drilling engineers, we must also focus training on those who superintend over our evacuation systems, the group gathering facilities, especially the metering assets. Over time, we've overlooked personnel who work in some of these assets. We think they are probably the lesser part of our operational organization. But these guys, every barrel you miss impacts on your bottom line. So we must focus capacity building around people who superintend over our metering assets. Evacuation challenges are not just technical, but they also expose systematic weakness across our governance system, whether it is political or it is educational or it is even health. Just to piggyback to the health system, we've seen massive outflow of health personnel out of this country because of poor pay. And are you surprised that you can hardly get credible doctors to treat people in some of our teaching hospitals? I lost my mom last year. I had a first-hand experience where we were using AI to diagnose the issue. And then I was running some of these symptoms with the student doctor that was overseeing my mom. And of course, at the end of the day, we lost her. Most of the top health professionals have all left. And that is why this evacuation challenges is also exposing some of the systematic issues we have across sector. This is not just about the oil and gas industry, but also some of the structural issues we've had over time. So therefore, Nigerian community must lead with innovative and advocacy on this issue. And thank God that we have the NIPET chair on board, and of course, other industry stakeholders, and of course, SP that plays a critical role in this sector. We must begin to speak more around some of these issues that has beclouded the industry. Why we produce, but yet what we produce does not get to the market. not just getting to the market, but getting to the market safely in such a way that the cost of getting to the market is affordable. So therefore, we must bridge some of these gaps that I've highlighted. We must raise and construct stronger institutions. We must take smart engineering in an innovative approach to solving some of these problems. And of course, craft out inclusive policies to address some of these gaps. I want to say tonight, no flow, no revenue. Nigerian survival depends on fixing some of these fault lines. So therefore, if we must survive, it requires collective actions from industry stakeholders, from policy makers, from students who are learning and researching and coming up with innovative solutions for the future. We must all put hands together to solve some of these problems I've highlighted tonight. Thank you, and God bless you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Chukwuemeke. That was very passionate of you. I was wishing we had some of our IOCs and regulators in this call, like NPRC, CCE, and the SCE of the Nigerian midstream also listening to you, because so that they could listen to your passionate discussion. Thank you so much. Aging infrastructures, pipeline vandalism and theft, security gaps, environmental impact, regulatory overlaps. These are a few of the challenges that the crude oil industry faces to evacuate her products. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for you to ask questions. We believe that after this passionate discussion, you may have one or two questions for Dr. Emeke so that he may clarify his perspectives, and you can also help him in spreading the good news on the way forward to this discussion. Please raise up your hands if you want to ask questions, or drop on the chat box and I'll read them for Dr. Emeke, please. Okay, Osman Ahmad, thank you for the lecture, sir. It seems the issue is quite interconnected. Okay, do you have any question? I believe that's a comment. Do you have a question? Which issue are you talking about? So let's refresh your chat as a question so that he may fully respond, except that is a comment. Please drop your comments. In the next 5 minutes, we will wrap up the comments if you don't have more questions. Okay, just a comment. The issue of crude oil lift. Okay. Thank you. Somebody has raised his hand up. Okay, Ogene. Can you unmute your mic and speak? After that, Obe will do. Okay, Ogene, please unmute your mic and ask a question.
Okay, all right. Thank you, off and on. Thank you, Dr. Chukwuemeke, for the presentation. I joined a bit late, so again, it was a later part of the presentation I was able to, partake in. But again, I quite understand, and I share your passion, Dr. Emeke, on the conversations we have, trying to ensure that the fault lines are bridged and we have a working crude evacuation system. As you are aware and you have alluded to already, we are not able to get the number of volumes we are picking up in the wellheads and the manifolds. We are unable to get them to the terminal for very obvious reasons that you have taken time again to elaborate here. But for me, again, and this is also a question to you to also give your opinion. I think the model of crude evacuation that we're currently utilizing in Nigeria as a whole needs to migrate from where it was before to a new model that works for us. And why am I saying this? If we look back at our aging infrastructure and the current model that we have for Cardos, Bonny Terminal, QIT, Chevron, Escravos facility, and the likes, right? These were designed to aggregate much volumes for the IOCs that were currently operating as at the time. But you agree with me that in the last 20 years, the operating model, again, for the marginal fields or the IOC, as the case may be, has shifted a bit to a more nimble, smaller kind of system. So this calls for a shift in the evacuation model we're using. I don't know what your thoughts are in this. Like maybe you want to throw more light on this and advice. So again, the mindset of the younger ones or the operators of pipeline like ourselves again can drill down and create new models, discuss with the regulators to come up with new, less robust kind of system that can work for this cluster. We have cluster assets now, as the case may be, and then we're able to have smaller evacuation system taking the products to terminal. I believe that model is going to work very well for us as a country. I don't know what your thoughts are on this, Dr. Emeka. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, my colleague in the Pipeline Association of Nigeria. Very instructive question. We need to begin to reshape our thinking around how we evacuate. Prior to this time, the thinking was to export. So if you see the way the pipelines were structured, it's structured such that you produce to terminal. We need to now begin to restructure that thinking from production to consumption, from production to the end user, from production to the market. That is the only way we can save the system. And I'm very passionate about this. If an individual in Dangote can build a 650,000 barrel per day capacity refinery that is servicing the entire West African, of course, the African region, continent, why can't operators, and thank God that this divestment is also putting a lot of economic power and decision making in the hands of locals who are now running some of this oil and gas industry. So if the white man thinking is to export raw materials to their home country to sustain the economy, our people that are taking over the aims of affairs can now begin to rework that model so that it's no longer production to export, but production to local consumption. So we can now begin to pull funds together, pull ideas together, and begin to run within Dangote model. So everyone in a landlocked region can pull funds together and say, guys, instead of stretching ourselves to get to Brass or to Forcados, can we have a modular refinery that is scalable over time, such that you don't necessarily need to think of how to move your crude from point A all the way to point B, that is at the end of the shores. But you can take it over a short distance, refine it, and then get it back to the market. You have full value for production, and of course, you have higher value on the economy. That is the kind of thinking that should come into that space. That is the only way we can cure some of these evacuation challenges that we are currently having. The problem is that where the product turns into finished product is too far away. So we must bring it closer, and then so that it is the product line that we should now start developing to get to the end consumer. Right now, we are still struggling to even get the raw materials to where it ought to get to. Instead of focusing energy, time, and intelligence on how to get the finished product to the end consumer. And that is something that must change going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so we'll just take just 2 questions and we wrap up for today. I'll come back to the question on the chat box. Chinedu, we'll read the question as the last question for today. Obey, please unmute your mic and ask the question.
Yeah. Good evening. Thank you very much, sir, for the lecture. Right, I learned a lot from this session. So my question is, so throughout the session, right, you were showing us different, you shared a lot of information, on, like, you shared the statistics of what we have in Nigeria, and with the information you shared, the problem seems to be obvious and the solutions also, right? So if given the information, and definitely those in power, right, they have all of these statistics, right? So the solutions are so apparent. So what would you say? Because, like, what would you say is the reason these solutions have not been implemented yet? Because you have had these problems, and these problems have consisted for many years, and like the problems are obvious, right? And the solutions are also somewhat obvious. I mean, for something like the metering transparency, right? That one has not been fixed, and the reason is obvious, right? Because the ones in power, they are benefiting from it. But there were some other solutions and other challenges that you mentioned. The security, rehabilitation of dormant lines. So, in your own opinion, what do you think the reason these things, even though so apparent, have not been fixed in so many years? Is there some underlying issue apart from these actual problems? Is there some underlying issue that you think might be, stopping the ones in power from actually taking these steps?
I know the issues are obvious, like you said, and the solutions are also very obvious. Let me put it this way. Nigeria is poor. We must come to that realization. It means that the way you utilize resources to solve your problems, your scarce resources, must be deliberate, effective, and such that for every 1 naira you spend, you are looking at the value you get from it. And that is what is missing. We have these very scarce resources that is being squandered on frivolities. I'll give you instances. There seems to be a model called the weakest model that is running AY across the country. What is weakest model? Build flyover and get the applause of people. How do you build flyover without the roads that will get you to where the flyover is? I'll give you instances. If I want to travel from Benin to Abuja, are the roads good? If I want to travel from other parts of the country into Abuja, are the roads good? But when you get into Abuja, there seems to be flyover and roads network all over the whole place. You get into Port Harcourt, there are flyover all over the whole place. But the road leading into Port Harcourt, are they good? From Aba, if not recently, they were trying to solve that Aba road. So why don't you solve the roads that you get into the city and then you can build flyover? And right now, that madness has spread across Edo State and Delta State, where we are building flyovers, and then the roads that connect you to the cities are not there. So why don't you fix the roads that get you into the city, and then you can build flyover, and then it makes sense. So we are not prioritizing how we utilize our scarce resources. And until we begin to do that, we're going to go in cycle. So you finish building flyovers and there are no roads to get you to the flyovers. So that is a problem. We know for sure that we don't have the road networks. We need to build pipelines. Even at the worst, assuming that the pipelines are not working, using trail to even evacuate these crude oil products will reduce your cost by 40%. Why, if your pipelines are not going to work, why are we not looking at the next best alternative, which is trail? Again, we are looking for temporary measure to solve long-lasting problem. Until we have leaders, policy makers who understand the problem and who are bold enough to say, guys, we don't have the resources. The little we have, we must begin to invest it in high impact, high value sectors. We'll continue to wallow in poverty. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. I like how you're taking time to dissect all of the questions. The last question for today, this is from Christian Chinedu. Thank you so much, sir, for this eye-opener. Layman question. I was thinking the crude as a raw item is not a finished product. What do these vandalizers do with it? Do they have contacts with refineries who transform them to petrol and the rest? Okay, over to you, sir.
I think the best way to answer is that they waste it. That is the best way to answer it. They actually waste it. Because you can actually get over 150 products from a barrel of crude oil. Crude oil is loaded. The ones probably you are used to is the PMS, the AGO, which is the diesel, the fuel oil. But there are variants of products from crude oil, variants. But these guys steal this crude oil, refine it within the level of their local capacity to just obtain diesel and waste the rest. So they steal this oil to just get a single line product. Meanwhile, that same crude oil can give you variants of products. So that is what I meant by saying they waste it. And in disposing the rest, they pollute the environment. So at one hand, they are stealing, at the other hand, they are also constituting environmental challenge for the Nigerian state. So that is why we must do all we can to stop this menace of crude oil theft and vandalism. Thank you.
Wow, thank you. Yes, I agree with Dr. Chukwemeka, they waste it. And this must stop, because Nigeria must enjoy the shared prosperity we should receive from our crude oil. Thank you so much, Dr. Emeke. Ladies and gentlemen, please can we give him some virtual applause, celebrating his time, his experience, his wealth of knowledge, and of course, taking time to answer our questions. Please drop some comments, celebrate his time with SP Abuja. So we are grateful and we say thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, of course, we switch gears to wrapping up the event. I'd like to announce that if you're not a member of SP Abuja, this is the time to join SPE. Just do a screenshot of what you see on your screen, and our membership chair will expect your call. Of course, new membership is 77,500 naira, while renewal is 62,500 naira. If you fail to renew before the last day of the year, 31st December, you would have to pay a reinstatement fee. Please do a screenshot, message engineer Rumi and tell him you would like to register and be part of SP Abuja, so that you may get first-hand information of all of our events. Screenshot of the account details to make payments, should you want to make payments immediately after this call. Yes, we are live on all social media platforms where we have updates on our events and our activities. Please do all to follow us from Instagram to Facebook to LinkedIn, and of course, comment, engage, and interact on our page. Who knows, you could win an award from the section chair when you do that. We have an event coming up on the 9th of April 2026. That is next week. It is the Oloibri Lecture Series and Energy Forum. Of course, this is where we gather minds in policy, minds from the IUC, from the regulators. We sit down and discuss on the theme beyond the 3 million barrels target. So please do well to register and be part of this event. Of course, let's wrap up the event with a closing remark by our program's chair, Professor Kafayat Adeyemi. However, she is represented by membership chair, Dr. Ogolo. Dr. Ogolo, please help us with a closing remark on behalf of the program's chair.
A very good evening to everyone. And the section chair, I've asked that to thank the keynote speaker, Engineer Dr. Chukwemeka, for the wonderful and brilliant presentation that he did. It's always a pleasure listening to Doc whenever he speaks. You see a lot of knowledge shared, a lot of things that we learned, and a lot of wishes as well. We wish that our dear nation, that the senators, the policymakers would be here today to listen to today's discussion and be able to put what I was recommended all into practice. Sometimes, you get to think whether these guys are also thinking too. So it's just a sad situation that we have. in our country. And I thank you, Doc, for bringing all of this into light and also sharing some pathways, which is a pathway of hope for us. So on behalf of the section, we wish to thank you for delivering the topic, crude oil evacuation challenges, the fault lines in the Nigerian states. And I will also thank others who have joined the call, members of the section, members from other sections, students, and young professionals, senior members that have joined the call today. We should thank you all. And as this was announced that we'll be having the OLEF coming up in April, so can do well to register so that we'll keep building a network of workable knowledge in the oil and gas sector. So thank you, and I wish us a good night ahead. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Membership Chair, Dr. Rumi. Ladies and gentlemen, please can you turn on your video cameras? Let's do a quick screenshot for the grab. Turn on video cameras. Let's do a screenshot, please. Just turn on video cameras, please. Wherever you are, when I say SPE, respond with culture of excellence. Yes, turn on video cameras, please. So wrap up in the next 2 minutes. Thank you. Thank you